Hey everyone, welcome to Build Your SaaS. This is the behind-the-scenes story of building a web app in 2020. I'm John Buda, a software engineer.
And I'm Justin Jackson. I do product and marketing. Follow along as we build Transistor.fm. So John, a little bit of a break last week.
Yeah, we had a busy week. We were both kind of busy, or just a little bit.
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah, I think it's okay to take a break every once in a while. Actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I thought maybe we'd start the show just doing kind of a general, an update on Transistor, how things are going. So, the most interesting thing I think for people listening is probably we had 2 really high growth months over the April and May. And we've been wondering if that would continue, and June has definitely been slower. So I'm not exactly sure what to think about that. Like, what?
Yeah, I don't even know what to think about April and May. I mean, was it because of COVID-19 and people were at home starting podcasts, or was it just, it's sort of hard to tell.
Mhm.
And then now there's the slowdown. Is it because everyone who wanted to start a podcast tried to start one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You had mentioned maybe it was some sort of because of the unrest in the US, but I don't know if that would necessarily be the case. It would almost seem like there'd be more of them being started because people would want to talk about
Oh yeah.
race issues.
Yeah,
and
I had
protests.
wondered if it was the protests, and that kind of, just civil unrest that was maybe affecting things.
Yeah.
My sense is that it was during the lockdown, people saw it as an opportunity to finally start that podcast that they'd wanted to start. We had reports of podcast microphones selling out at Amazon. Multiple people on Twitter saying they wanted to get one, but they couldn't. So I think that's actually probably what happened. And interesting to see how, we always think of human beings as individuals, but they really do move in groups. Like, I had this thought when the lockdown happened. I've always been into these looping machines.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, maybe now's the time to get that looping machine. And I wasn't the only one to have that thought. Like, looping machines also were sold out in a lot of places. So there was something about being in your house going, okay, this is the time to get that VR headset. This is the time to get that microphone and do that podcast.
Yeah, I mean, all that stuff. Nintendo Switches are sold out everywhere. A lot of, just things that you would use at home to pass the time. Either, new projects or just something fun.
Again, I find that stuff fascinating, how there can be these conditions in society that lead to market demand. And this is one of the things I would go back to school for. Is I think I've gotten fairly good at being able to observe and somewhat determine when there is market demand and respond to it. So over the years, I've been able to identify, there's increasing market demand here, and maybe we should respond to it. But what I'm still not sure about is how that demand gets created. Like, what causes that rising tide of a bunch of human beings to all kind of in a group at the same time decide to get into podcasting, or to switch to Slack, or to get a chat widget on their website? Like, what are the conditions that leads to that happening? And I think that would be fascinating to do like a master's or a PhD on that, to figure out, because I don't even know is that economics? But for sure, there's some feedback loops in there. right? As things become more popular, it reinforces popularity. If your friend has a podcast and then your other friend gets a podcast, part of you wants a podcast.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, that we saw these growth numbers, and now June we're still growing, but we're not growing as fast.
Yeah. Yeah, we still have yet to hit a month where we've actually lost money. And I don't know if that's coming or like that'll be a pretty momentous thing.
Yeah.
If we have a month where it's like, oh, our revenue actually went down.
Well, and this brings up another issue, which is we haven't faced the plateau, and we haven't also faced a downward trend. And
right, which I mean is, especially in the US, I can't speak to Canada or many other countries, but the financial situation in this country is not great. Like it was propped up by some government incentives to give people money and stuff during coronavirus, but that's also not getting better at the moment. So like there's still the potential for a massive economic downturn in this country, which would probably affect us quite a bit more than we saw, I think.
So part of the reason we're exposed is we do have a lot of hobbyists and, people doing this podcast on the side. And so their Transistor subscription is on their personal credit card.
Yep.
On the other hand, we're somewhat protected because it's very unlikely that, a bunch of those individual plans will all cancel at the same time. If we notice, an increase in churn, that we'll notice that, we'll be able to see it coming. Basically, I don't want to be naive and say we don't need to keep an eye on it. And I think also this is a good time for us to start thinking about the inevitable end of the wave we're on. So.
Yeah, we've talked about it very briefly as far as like what's next, what could we add, or what could we kind of something new we could come up with to sort of add on a new like layer of value or some new feature or something that would attract maybe different types of people.
Now, one question that's interesting to ask there is what are we trying to optimize for? What's our goal? And I think part of our goal is we've built up this asset and we know that it's not going to go forever. And so we're trying to now de-risk ourselves, diversify the risk. And one way to do that is to start another product. Another way to do that is to evolve the product so that you're kind of like swimming out to the next wave that's just starting to build. Another way to do that is to take some investment and take money off the table. Another way to do that is to, optimize for expansion revenue or go after different types of customers. So there's some other options. There's some options ahead of us, and it feels like it's worth considering those things. I think you and I both kind of will default to how do we make the product better, or maybe our second option would be what other kinds of products could we build. But to know that there are other options that we should probably also consider, right? And I mean, I haven't even mentioned all of them. Like there are new channels that we haven't pursued. We could, hire a full-time salesperson to just go out and basically speak to people who are hosted with our competitors and ask them if they want to switch. Like there are other things we could do to I think it's to protect ourselves because, I mean, I can't, yeah, it'll be interesting to speak for you to speak for yourself. But I mean, right now, I am, I want to make plans for the future. And as stable as MRR is, like let's say I buy a new house, which is something I'm considering. There's always these thoughts of, okay, well, how protected am I right now? And the future is unknown. And so what are some ways we can build some resilience into the system here? Do you think like that at all, or how do you think about things?
Yeah, sometimes, but I think I also think a little bit more about like how big do we want to get, which is something we've talked about before.
Like in a stressful way, like you don't want to get too big.
It's hard for me to see revenue dropping so fast that we have no control over it. Right? So to sort of think about, how to build in resiliency, I just feel like we sort of have to keep on top of it as we see it happening. I mean, I don't know. I guess nothing's certain, right? I mean, there could be a day where something happens and people just cancel very fast. But on the other hand, like, if you have a full-time job, there's really no guarantee that you're going to have keep your job there either.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, just you and I talking about it right now is helpful. This is why podcasts are helpful in the therapy sense, because, I said something and then you said something. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, like, let's think about our risks.
Yeah. And we have a good buffer right now as far as money goes. Like, I think we talked about that at the onset of this pandemic, is like we could take a decent hit and still be okay.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen, which is great. But I think the same still goes for whatever's next.
And I sometimes just looking at the numbers when you get anxiety, I think this is a common thing for founders, is you get anxiety and you just let the anxiety jiggle around in your brain, right? Like I could read the news and it's like, oh, look at this looming economic, tsunami that's coming. And I could also just look at the numbers and go, okay, well, I can't predict the future, but, like our highest churn was actually before the pandemic in January. And then before that, we had high churn in August as well. August 2019. And so we're down from both of those highs. There's something about that I think is reassuring to think, okay, well, there's going to be some churn, but right now there's nothing in our charts that show, that we should be really, really concerned. And now we've been in business for a couple years. And so I can look at, all the way back from May 2018, and I can see, actually, if we look at, we had some really high churn numbers in September of 2018. I don't know what happened there. September 2018, some big churn numbers, maybe because...
Well, that's right after we launched.
Yeah, so maybe, and because the numbers were so low back then, actually revenue churn spikes at the same time that growth rate is spiking, which was right after we launched. Yeah, that's probably why. So, yeah, I think that's interesting to kind of take a pulse. But on the other hand, think about, what do we want to do, right? Because we know if we just sit still and don't do anything, if we don't evolve, then we become Kodak or, some of these other companies that just were too comfortable.
But on the other hand, that is still that is an option. We could literally not add anything new and just do customer support, and then take that time to work on something else, and we'd still make revenue every month, which I don't think either of us want to do right now, but it is.
Yeah.
That is an option.
Yeah, there's other ways for us to diversify. And it's interesting, like ConvertKit, they just launched a digital commerce. So they're basically trying to become more like Gumroad or Podia. And that's interesting to me. It's like, okay, wow, they're making moves, right? They have aspirations of becoming a billion-dollar company. And that's interesting. Basecamp just launched Hey. So, of all the people who would be kind of financially set up, you got to imagine that's Jason and David. And they still felt like they wanted to put something new into the world. That's interesting as well. And then you have Peldy at Balsamiq, and he's kind of, he's just building new versions of Balsamiq. And in some ways, I think he's trying to figure out how he can pull himself out of the company. And he's kind of gotten what he wanted out of the company. Let's take a little break. Let's do our bootstrapper shout out. This is another name I recognize, Newsii, NUSII.com. It's online proposal software. So it's for creatives like website developers, designers, and marketing agencies. And this is owned by Michael. I've known Michael for a while. But yeah, if you want simple proposals in minutes, nice proposal templates, you're a freelancer and you need to, send out a bid or whatever, this is the software to do it. NUSII, Newsii.com.
Not to be confused with Newsies, the Disney film from 1992. Starring Christian Bale. I had to look that up.
I remember that. That's hilarious.
It has a 39% score on Rotten Tomatoes.
But it doesn't matter. People, that movie resonated. Weirdly, on Google, 83% liked the film.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely some nostalgia. The box office for Newsies was $2.8 million. Just seems so small. The budget was $15 million.
Yeah, it does. Speaking of industries that you are glad you're not in at the moment.
Yeah, theater, not so much. But, I mean, I don't know if I love it when things get disrupted, but it is interesting that, like, if you ask most people, would you prefer the choice of going to the theater or being able to watch it in your home, but at the same time that it's in the theater? People will say, well, yeah, I would like to have that choice. And more often than not, I'd probably choose, I just want to watch it at home.
It'd be nice to have the choice. There are certain movies I would definitely want to watch in the movie theater.
But you can see it's like a false choice. But. And I think whenever there's a false choice, this would actually be another interesting question for you and I to ask ourselves. Like, what are the false choices that we present our customers or that the podcast industry presents customers because it's just the way it is or it protects our interests or whatever? Because those are possible places to be disrupted. And you know that Disney is running that math right now. And if they feel like it is to their advantage to just start, sending theater releases directly to Disney Plus subscribers, but you have to pay like an extra $20 or whatever, and people are willing to pay it, they're running that math. And
right. Yeah, it could change things forever.
Because it is a false choice, right? Like in some ways, the theater companies were holding everyone ransom, saying, well, no, you've got to go through us because we've got this big distribution channel. And if you, do go direct to video, then we just won't deal with you anymore. We'll run your next movie on less screens. And they had some bargaining power, but as the leverage changes,
you might get more people watching it because, to take if it's a kids movie, you're taking a family of 4 to a movie. It's really expensive now.
And if you've ever I remember we took our kids to a movie when they were really young, The Incredibles, and my son just would not sit for the whole thing. And so 20 minutes in, we just ended up going outside for a walk. It's like, okay, well, that was fun, you know. Yeah, so those false choices are interesting. There are a lot of those, like, you know, software licensing. The way software gets licensed is one of those false choices where, you know, sometimes you pigeonhole people into a certain license type, but really what would be better for them is, you know, giving them more freedom or something. And there's opportunities there. You know, like, I mean, in some ways, Netflix is taking advantage of this, right? They can produce content and then just say, well, we're just going to skip the theaters and we're just going to go directly to Netflix subscribers. And let's talk about this next one quick. In our calendar, John, there's a big note for July 2nd, and it says
slow down.
Slow
all caps.
down. Now,
I noticed it last week. Prepare to slow down was on the 25th of June. So
I feel like we're in the episode of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where our past selves are leaving notes for our future selves.
So we did a slowdown over the holidays in which we didn't record and we didn't really build a lot of new things. We kind of took some time off, and we planned out these slowdown periods back in the middle of last year. I don't remember when we did it. With, you know, obviously not realizing that we'd be in the middle of a pandemic and things would be a little bit weird and different than we thought they would be.
Because things kind of naturally slowed down, but in a weird way.
Yeah. Right. I mean, do you still feel like you need to slow down?
Well,
take a break for the summer?
I have two thoughts about this. One is my kids are just now out of school. And so part of the reason I've had this feeling in the past is when I was running my own business, I was always, you know, in the grind and would rarely kind of come up for air and look around. And so invariably, like, I would get kind of sideswiped by the summer where all of a sudden my kids are home and I'm still going to the office full time. And it's just like, there's just conflict because my kids are home. And not even that, like, I think even if I didn't have kids, it's like, it's when my family comes and visits. It's like, it's when my friends want to go float down the river or go for a bike ride. And for me personally, I don't know how you deal with this stuff, but for me personally, I'm not naturally good at taking time off. Like, here's a good example. And I don't know why it frustrates me so much, but like my friend Tony, he had my boys over at his house with his boys. And then when he dropped my boys off, they were all going mountain biking. And I instantly kind of had this pang of like, I haven't created room for us to all go mountain biking really this year. And that happens to me all the time. Like, it'll be the middle of the summer and I'll be like, oh, like I didn't plan anything special. Like we didn't go camping and so.
Yeah. I mean, certainly this summer.
Yeah.
it's harder to do it here maybe than Canada. I don't know, but.
Yeah. I mean, people can camp.
Yeah. I mean, you can here too. But yeah. It's a little more difficult. But it is. For me, it is. I don't generally do a great job of planning to take time off. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's easy to just think there's unlimited amount of work and
like routine is good, but
so is variety.
Yeah.
So
it's a good way to put it.
And also, I mean, the thing that would be nice to take a break now. I mean, Illinois is in a decent place with, COVID-19, as opposed to some of the other areas in the U.S. at the moment, which is going back up pretty severely. But, my concern is that we in the U.S. are going to be stuck inside again in the winter anyway.
Yeah.
And the fall, things are going to be closed down again.
Mm-hmm.
and might be beneficial to sort of try to take advantage of some of that now. Get outside while it's nice out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like we're actually both feeling like now is a good time to slow down. In terms of like, are we going to start a big new project right now? Like, am I going to take a break from blogging and tweeting, which is like a big part of like my brand, but also something that drives a lot of interest to Transistor. But do I want to keep that up over the summer, or do I want to create space for, like, if, for example, like I could tweet all weekend and it could just consume my whole weekend.
Right.
And maybe I just need to take a break and like have, have some space to like go, oh, like I'm not staring at my screen. I'm not looking at customer support. I'm not, uploading this podcast that I forgot to upload after we recorded. I now have space to look at my boys on the couch playing iPads and go, oh man, like let's get outside.
Yeah. I mean, schedule an hour a day or a half hour to do that stuff, or every other day. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's less, that stuff is less of a concern to me because I just don't really do much of it.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. So yeah, what do you think? Do you think we should stick with our plan? I also like the idea of having a cadence anyway. Like we kind of half did this last summer, because last summer was the summer where we're like, okay, like let's try to do this. And but getting in the habit of it and going, okay, yeah, I'm going to create some space and kind of put myself in that mode of it's summertime. Let's answer customer support. But let's give ourselves time to go outside. Let's give ourselves time to do a road trip if it's allowed. Like it would be nice to have some of that in there.
Right. I mean, it would be nice. Whether or not we do it this week or not, I don't know, because there's a couple things we're trying to finish up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have the API V1 is kind of...
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly done. I think we could probably get that out this week in some sort of like trial version for certain people that we choose or want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe actually release it after some sort of break.
Yeah.
And then I'm still trying to finish up this new draft schedule publish workflow for episodes for podcasts. So
yeah,
be nice to get that out too.
Yeah.
The thing is though that like both of those are going to generate probably some new support requests. So
I mean, support is like not as much of a concern for me, because I've kind of come up with we have Helen helping us out. And then I'm getting pretty good at answering stuff on my phone. And so it's not like I'm completely disengaged, but it feels like support is like, and maybe even like I'll still in the summer want to be able to walk down to my office and get a coffee and, like go through some tickets and then, go home.
Right.
So I mean, support is one of those things that, and also actually I've just started pair programming with a new, just a contractor in Texas. And, I think she's available all summer, and I've actually been really enjoying it. And that might be worth having scheduled, like, okay, well, this is fun. And it's like, she's learning and I'm learning, and we have a project where we're trying to get it on, maybe change the site to Netlify and have it all statically generated. Once we get that project done, then, there's like, we could spend time refactoring all this template code that I've written. We could build some new, like I think has enough JavaScript chops that we could build, like, some experiments, like maybe a podcast name generator, like some marketing kind of engineering as marketing. So it feels like you and I always find something to kind of chip away at. It's like giving ourselves permission, I think, to, for example, maybe not record the show through the summer.
Right.
Giving ourselves permission to not have to build a big new cycle. Like we can finish the projects we're on, and maybe just have those projects that we just chip away at over the summer that don't even have a defined cycle. They're just like things we work on as we're in the midst of wakeboarding and hiking.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a number of features that we've thought about that might need some research, or just like playing around with a few things to actually decide whether it's worth it or not. Or
yeah.
And that's the type of stuff. Like, us taking a break doesn't mean we're going to step away from our computers for a month. Really, I mean,
I always like the way Paul Jarvis put it. He says, he emails his newsletter list and says, I'm taking a break over the summer. Doesn't mean I'm not going to be working. It's just I'm going to be doing things that require kind of heads down mode and thinking. What I like about it is it acknowledges that so much of that time, when you're really on and you're really consuming the fire hose of business, like for me, it's like I'm sucking up tweets and emails and meetings and podcast interviews and new blog post ideas and new product ideas and partnership requests. And that's just a big fire hose. And when I'm on, I really like it. And for you, it's like you're sucking up, like, working with a contractor. Here's a bunch of new issues. Here's a big, hairy project that you need to finish. Here's a whole refactoring. Yeah. Here's, a bunch of support tickets that only you can deal with. And I think there's something about saying, okay, I'm just going to turn off the fire hose of all the extra stuff that isn't like deep work that I just like deep, thoughtful work that I want to get done. And even though I think the fire hose, at least for me, being in marketing and sales, is like important. I think I do need to be like in the fray, taking time to not be in the fray, I think is healthy.
I would agree with that.
Cool. So let's stick with the plan. And I think what we're doing now is we're announcing that we are going to pause the podcast. So again, if we feel like recording an episode, or maybe I'll feel like, having a call with somebody and publishing it, we'll still do that. But if you don't see an episode from us until the fall, that is why. I think I tried publishing all through the summer last year. And again, maybe I'll do that, but I just don't want to promise anything.
Yeah. We could do a slow down check-in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly. Why don't we end off? We weren't sure if we were going to talk about this, but I think it's worth talking about. You cool? So. Okay. So Simplecast, one of our competitors, sold to Sirius XM radio. And what were your thoughts when you heard about it?
I think it makes sense. It's sort of another one of those, like Spotify buying Anchor. It's this consolidation of podcasting related tools under these larger broadcast companies, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Sirius also owns Pandora, which is a music and podcasting, listening platform.
Yeah.
So it certainly makes sense for them. I obviously have some other thoughts on the issue that maybe we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah. There's like an undercurrent we always kind of dance around. Um,
I'm like, maybe I should talk about that, but maybe not.
yeah.
No, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
They raised money. It seems like any company that raises money is going to at least at some point think about selling.
Yeah.
Because they have investors who need to get a return on their money.
Yeah. And I mean, so yeah, we have some like personal issues or experience with Simplecast that we probably can't talk about right now. If we put those feelings aside, which is actually kind of difficult, but if we put those feelings aside, what's interesting about it is that Simplecast, as opposed to Gimlet or Anchor or any of these other companies, is more our scale. Like they're really one of our closest competitors.
Right.
Like people switch to us from Simplecast all the time. And I looked up their numbers, and they have about 2 times the podcasts in Apple Podcasts than we do. And so they're a much older app, and it's actually surprising how much ground we've gained on them. I think we have about 5,000 podcasts in Apple Podcasts that at least this one stats place knows about. We have much more podcasts than that on Transistor, but and then they have about 10,000, so about double. And if you look at our overall market share, Simplecast has 0.828%, so under 1%, and we have 0.389%. So we're effectively at the same scale. And they had raised $7 million reportedly. And what was interesting is some of the investors were on Twitter, and they seemed pretty happy about the exit.
It kind of makes you wonder how much they sold for. I think because Sirius is a publicly traded company, we will actually know that number at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah,
it's interesting because it's just compared to Transistor, like it's just the two of us. We have not taken investment. It seems like Simplecast has something like 20 employees. I mean, that's like at least a $2 million payroll every year.
Yeah.
Probably.
And what else is interesting about that when we talk about scale is that, so they have 5,000 podcasts. They have 10,000. We have 5,000, but we have 2 full-time employees. And you'd say they have 20?
I think they have something like 20. I mean, I don't know exactly, but it's up there. They have a pretty sizable team. Plus they have, they do have much bigger, more popular podcasts, right? Which definitely increase things like bandwidth cost. Mm-hmm. I don't know what type of custom contracts they have with those podcasts. They may be fairly expensive for those podcasts to, host a Simplecast. I don't really know, but it's a weird thing to think. But like if everyone's happy about it, then I'm happy for them. Like they seem like good people, and they did build a great product, and they have definitely some cool technology behind like a lot of their analytics and like advertising stuff they have built in, and editing tools and dynamic insertion of things. But it's just, I don't know. I still am just so skeptical of these, like, whatever, if you want to call them liquidity events, right? Where these things happen and then it's a bunch of people on Twitter just like going back and forth, congratulating each other about joining the team, or
yeah.
And saying that nothing's ever going to change, which
it always does.
Seems like things always does. And
yeah.
Some people made a bunch of money. I don't know who. I don't know if maybe the founders did, or it's impossible to say. But
yeah. That's the other part that's interesting is efficiency-wise, Transistor is a much more efficient company. By the way, Sirius bought AdsWiz. AdsWiz, a digital advertising company, in 2018 for $66.3 million in cash plus shares. Wow. And it's not out of it. out of possibility that it could have spent the same for Simplecast. My guess is it's in the range of 14 million to 35 million was the actual acquisition price, but I'm completely guessing. I don't know. What's interesting is we go, okay, Transistor has a product that's gained a ton of ground on them. Transistor is a much more efficient company, and Transistor has raised no money. And for us, I think as founders, there's just that's going to make you pause no matter what, because I maybe like, do you want to bring up that conversation you had with Mike?
Oh yeah. But he had mentioned that he had talked to you about sort of what he would be happy to walk away with if something he had built had gotten purchased. And he mentioned something like any number that sort of is a life-changing number,
yeah,
right? Which can, whatever that may be, it's different for everyone, but like, what's the amount of money that would change your life in a meaningful way? And if whatever that number is, you should take it if it's offered, right?
Yeah.
And that could be anything. It could be the amount of money that you would never have to work again, which for some people would be boring. It could be the amount of money where you could take 10 years off, up to 10 years off, and just do anything else and not have to worry about necessarily making money. Although I think anyone who has built something and sold it would probably eventually figure out something else that they wanted to do within those 10 years, well before those 10 years are up. And start something else or invest, or, so I'm sure some people might just completely switch to something else entirely. There's a lot of freedom that comes with having whatever amount of money would be sort of life-changing.
Yes. And especially having it in now, because I mean, going back to our anxiety piece, and I'm sure some people who are starting out are going, wow, like it's so iterative, right? Like when you're going from $0 to $10,000 a month, you're just trying to get to that point where this thing pays, a month's worth of expenses, right? It's like, this month Transistor paid all of my expenses. And then the next month it pays your expenses, and you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. And you have a string of those, and you kind of get out of, you're no longer in just like, I'm just building this thing so that hopefully I can survive. Like your survival instincts are like, okay, now things are starting to become more stable. And that's where I'd say we are now. Like things are stable. We have some margin month to month. But what we don't have is assurance that for the future.
Right.
And in some ways, maybe we do, right? Like we could probably borrow against our SaaS revenue and the likelihood that it will not decrease by a ton month over month. But we also know there are disruptive events. I'm sure the theater industry was like, things are great, but people still are going to see movies, and we've had all these Marvel blockbusters, and like, what could possibly happen that will disrupt this? And it's like, wow, we didn't think pandemic would be it. Maybe there's so many, you never know. So certainly the most safe and stable is if someone is willing to give you money now that is, like you said, or Mike said, life-changing enough that you don't have to worry about it anymore. There is something about that. And
yeah, there is. I mean, it's appealing in a way. It's also, I don't know about you, I would feel like we'd be letting our customers down to a certain extent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we've always said this is like an unfair question, because on one hand, we are fiercely independent. And we, you can look at what I've been saying and podcasting and writing about forever. And from the beginning of this podcast, you and I said, we want to be independent. We don't want to take venture capital money. We want to build a great tool that serves customers. We're going to wake up in the morning and answer customer support requests all the way until we go to bed. We are going to do our best to give people a great experience, and we are going to be unencumbered by, anyone breathing down our necks saying we have to grow at a certain pace or whatever. Right. On the other hand, we've also always said it's an unfair question because someone comes over to your ear and goes, hey, what if I gave you $3 million right now? And you're like, $3 million. And you're like, nah, that's probably not. Well, what if I made it 10, Justin? and I'm like, 10. Wow, okay. But oh no, our customers, and okay, how about I make it 15? And you get to have Howard Stern's old office. So, it gets to be harder, right? Like, it's like, yeah. Hey, John, I could give you enough money that you could just bake bread for the rest of your life. I'm going to build you the most impressive bakery you've ever seen. Like, that there's a tension between these two things, even though self-righteously, I want to keep serving our customers. In fact, I think if I had absolute assurance that I could do this forever without the risk of losing it all,
right,
I would choose to do this forever because I really do enjoy what I do. And it really shows you how incredible that Bezos deal was that 37 Signals got. Because if someone came along now, I think there's been guesses at how much they got. I don't know if it was 10 million, or if someone wanted to buy a percentage of our shares and give us each a couple million, that would dramatically change things for me to know that, like for 2 million, I could buy a really nice house and be mortgage free and also still have some money for emergencies. It seems like a silly thing to be talking about, especially if you're in the phase where you're just kind of building things up. But eventually you'll get here. Eventually people get here.
Yeah. Eventually. And, I don't think either of us knows what necessarily happened with Simplecast, whether or not they were approached by Sirius, or if they were sort of at the point where they were like, we should sell this because things aren't going as well as we wanted, or the investors were getting anxious. Who knows?
Yeah.
But there is, eventually that option to say, all right, we can work with someone to shop this around and say maybe someone's interested that wouldn't have necessarily known about us. But I think that's not necessarily anytime soon. Although I think we've talked about like maybe there's this window for podcasting where stuff like that could happen, and after that window, we may have missed it, and who knows what that is.
Yeah, that's that is the actual big concern.
But then again, places like Libsyn and Buzzsprout have been around for 10 plus years, I think. So
yeah, I mean, our industry definitely has grown slowly, and it's very likely that podcast will continue to be a thing. Although, like, I think there's also ways we could hedge against that too. Like, right. we could expand the product in ways that where we're not just relying on podcasting. So yeah, it's an interesting stuff to think about. And I thought maybe the listeners would find that intriguing, maybe just to hear what we're thinking. Let's end it here. Let's give a shout out to the folks who support us on Patreon. And by the way, just so they know, for the past couple months, we've donated, I think, almost all of our Patreon money. We found some great causes that we've been contributing to. So just so Patreons know, like, we really appreciate their support, and we've been trying to pass that goodwill along. But yeah, let's thank these folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks to everyone for supporting us in the past and currently. We have Colt Borg, Mark Binder, Anton Zorin, Bill Kondo, Sophia Quintero, Diogo, Chris Willow, Mason Hensley, Borja Soler, Ward Sandler, Travis Fisher, Matt Buckley, Russell Brown, Evandro Sassi, Pradyumna Schembecker, Noah Prale, Robert Simplicio, Colin Gray, Josh Smith, Ivan Kirkovic, Brian Ray, Shane Smith, Austin Lovelace, Michael Sitfer, Paul Jarvis and Jack Ellis, Dan Buda, my brother, Darby Frey, Samori Augusto, Dave Young, Brad from Canada, Sammy Schukert, Mike Walker, Adam Devander, Dave Junta.
Junta!
So waiting for it.
I want to give some space for the listeners, you know?
Yeah. Well, build up some anticipation. And finally, Kyle Fox from GetRewardful.com.
Thanks, everyone. And we hope you have a great summer. Stay tuned. You never know. We might publish some episodes, and we'll talk to you next time we talk to you.
Yeah. Be safe and have a good summer.